Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. Today's guest has over 22 years of IT and cybersecurity experience. I first worked with him over a decade ago when he was just a frontline manager, and now he's the CISO at TELUS Digital Solutions, a division of TELUS Digital. Adrian Guevara, welcome to the show.
What's up? Happy to be here. You guys may have some unexpected visitors. I have a couple critters kind of walking around here, and they may, poke their heads in.
Well, hopefully they can add a little bit to the podcast, and I love it. Really excited to have you here. Let's jump right in. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest data security challenge that organizations are facing?
That is you just dropped like a hand grenade, like in the first go, didn't you? It's like,
Boom.
Let's go for it. I think the biggest security challenge right now is understanding how AI is affecting your business, because regardless whether you want to adopt it or not, you've adopted it. Like, it's in everything. And for those long-standing partnerships that you've probably had, they're also, integrating it into their software because they feel the need to keep up with competition. And so that comes on two folds, both what's going into the models and also, the rise of MCP last year in November has just exploded and allowed data to be accessed and shared pretty easily. And it's pretty trivial now, and you don't need IT to do it. And that's the scary part. But it's also an awesome part, right? To kind of move business along.
It's exciting, right? I think daily we're seeing new things pop on. So you use an acronym. I don't know if all of our guests are going to know, can you educate us? MCP, what is that?
So MCP is Model Context Protocol, and it is a protocol developed to share context with a model. So to easily grab Salesforce data and do something with that data to then send it to at a high level, to send it to the model and get an answer back, right? It's just all about context, and context is going to be king over the next 18 months with AIs at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy. So totally agree with the challenge. How do you recommend folks start to kind of get a grip on how the business or how folks are using or looking to use AI, or how are you actually solving that challenge?
I'm a CISO. I'm a security educated person, and I've been in security and IT for a long time. But first and foremost, I'm a tech enthusiast, right? I like to tinker with stuff as I have the time. And I think the biggest thing that you can do as a leader, and it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, leadership, frontline worker, hands-on keyboard, but just messing with it, learning it, trying to understand it is going to be the best place that you can be in. Because once you understand, which I'm not saying you're going to understand it fully, because I'm learning stuff every day, right? But once you have a grasp of what it is and how it can be used, then as a defender, you can understand of how you can put some guardrails in place or mitigate some of that.
I like that answer. I think it's great. I reflect back. I remember in my own journey, individual contributor to my first leadership position, one of my mentors at the time said, "Hey, Ward, you're coming upon a fork in the road. Which path do you want to take? Path to the right is leadership. Path to the left is you stay individual contributor, i.e. technical." And there was a misconception, I feel like, and I keep hearing this misconception, that the more you get into leadership, the less you are going to be hands-on. And I think in some cases that's true, right? I think in some cases you do need to trust the folks that report to you. You need to empower them to be able to, make certain decisions, since they are the ones that hands-on. But I feel like as leaders, I heard it from you, impressive as a CISO, certainly myself, like you have to stay at least a little bit in the tech, at least as a hobbyist, to know what's going on. Sounds like you embody that.
Well, I don't know if I embody it. I try to do as best as I can. And sometimes I have to do it while everyone else in my family is sleeping because there is no other time in the day as a leader, right? And that does not mean I don't get up early with the family, right? It just sometimes you lose sleep doing it, but it's a dedication. And this is why in this type of business or industry, whatever you want to call it for security and technical jobs, you got to love what you're doing because there's going to be hard times and there's going to be times you have to learn things on your own. And without that love, it just makes it much more harder to do.
Passion. Right, gotta be passion. I don't know about you. I've been remote for about we'll call it 12 years at this point, and I found early on, especially like you and I right now, right? You and I are virtually with each other. We're having a conversation. If you hop on a conversation with somebody and you sound like Eeyore, right, from Winnie the Pooh, no one's gonna want to talk to you. You know, down in the dumps, ho hum all the time. Like you gotta figure out what you're passionate about to actually get yourself in front of the good old webcam to have conversations, to collaborate and get stuff done. Um, so going back to the challenge, AI and understanding it. What one solution you proposed was got to understand it, right? Got to play with it, got to try to get hands on. Where do you suggest folks start with some of that? Are there some good, things you found? Any tips and tricks you have for our audience?
I don't know if there's a particular like a script that you would run to try to get from A to B. I think understanding, if you have a good understanding of your business, it kind of leads you in the direction of where to start. If you are a data driven business, then you start with the data and how to manipulate that data and how to use that data. If you are a frontline CX business, then you start with how can you make the job easier and better for your agents, on the front lines. It's understanding your business and understanding your business needs can then drive you in that direction.
Feel like some of that might be collaboration with the business as well, right? Because there's so many brains in an organization, right? There's so many people trying to get work done. They all have their own tasks and jobs, and they might have more time than you or I to play with these new tools and whatnot. So, how about like sitting down and just working shoulder to shoulder? Do you often do that in your day to day?
Yes, I do that quite a bit. Now, because I have mostly developers in my purview, so that technologist or that tech enthusiast that I am comes into play with then because I'm like, hey, move over. Let's see if we can figure this thing out. Um, and a lot of times they're like, dude, what are you doing here? Go go be an exec somewhere. Go sign some checks. But I just refuse to be that guy. So um anyways, standing shoulder to shoulder with them and trying to figure some of these problems out. And if you have an understanding and you're playing it with it yourself, then you give suggestions. And then the conversation changes from oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'm just going to tell him and yada, yada, yada to, oh, no, no, no. He knows what he's doing. He has an understanding about it. Maybe I can bounce some ideas off of him. And that's, creating yourself and making it more of an approachable. You make yourself more approachable when that happens. And that leads to more collaboration.
So again, going back to some of my own roles, not necessarily AI, but data security initiatives in general. When I would enable my team members to have these conversations, I often had like a checklist, right? Hey, something new's happening. Ask these 15 questions. Hopefully not 15, but you know what I mean. Ask these questions and start figuring out what's going on. Do you have a similar like A, B, C types of things that you ask every time of your business users?
There's one question that comes to mind, and I got this from an old boss of mine, and it was, can we do it better? And I just keep asking myself that question: is this the right solution, and can we do it better? That drives a lot of what I do today. Sometimes it can be disruptive, but you always get to a point where you have not only uh, found a solution that works best for you, but you've revalidated that solution. It may be nothing changes, even if you ask that question. And it may be something has, and usually the change comes from the people on the front line who are doing the day to day, who are down deep in it. Because I'll ask them the question, cool, can we do it better? Even with application security, I'll ask them the question, hey, I think we should do this. And they're like, oh God, that's not gonna fly, Adrian. And here's why. Once you make yourself approachable, then that conversation goes two-way. And then you're asking, okay, well, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Could you do it better? And that is a hard question to ask sometimes. And they'll spit out an answer, especially engineers of the younger generation. They're not afraid to speak their mind. And I think we could all learn from that, honestly. And, once they give you some feedback, they will lead you down a path of, can we do it better? And I have changed security tools over the course of my 10 years here with WillowTree / TELUS Digital now, because of the feedback that I've received from that team. It could be easy for me to just like, hey, no, we're just going to stick with it and keep renewing. But that isn't the goal. The goal is to have a better security posture. And if they can help me get there, I'm going to enlist them to help me get there, because that gives them part ownership of the situation. And when new folks come in, the folks who have been here hold it down for you.
That's great. And you don't always hear that, right? I feel like in a number of organizations out there, they kind of get their favorite players, right, in their tooling, and they just kind of, it's almost a square peg round hole, right? The hole keeps changing shape with AI and with other things being brought in, and you keep just trying to jam like, too darn bad. We have this tool, we got to make it work, instead of figuring out how do you bend that tool, or say, well, shoot, this was good last year. Our needs have changed. Now we need to move forward. So, do you find yourself? I'm going to assume the answer is yes, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. With AI, right? Your answer being AI being one of the biggest data security challenges. Like, do you find a lot more conversations these days with your vendor partners being about AI and in either how they're using it, how they're supporting it, or how they're securing it?
Yes, absolutely. How you're using it, where's that data going? And I'm sure that we're all having those conversations in some of the EULAs and terms of services. And sometimes the terms of services change on you. Slack did that and got their hand slapped, a few months now, about 6 months back now. So those are the things that you have to constantly keep abreast of. And I definitely have a lot of those conversations with some of our vendors. And where I can, some vendors allow us to be, some sort of design partner or even advisory partner. And so, those I try to engage with because I can help guide the tool the way I want it to go. That suits my needs, but also understanding that it has to suit the needs of their business too.
Awesome. So going back to AI in business, I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, you alluded to it, there's more and more tools out there that's either integrating with a third-party AI solution or LLM, or they're baking it in. Something that was a thorn in my side years ago before AI it is still a problem. And it's having multiple tools in the organization doing the same darn thing, right? I always use the example of PDF or document converters, right? You've got the various flavors that you can buy licensing for, and then you've got the freeware online that you can do the same thing. And trying to lock it down and saying, look, our de facto standard, gold standard, whatever term you use, is this thing. This is what we're going to use. If this doesn't work, we're going to go through a process to evaluate why, and if we need to have another standard added, right? We're going to have two solutions for that. Do you have any similar processes around AI or generative or whatnot for your organization today?
Yeah. So remember, I work with a bunch of developers, so that's a little bit with AI a little bit more difficult. However,
Oh yes,
we do have. So with the developers, we've got a suite of tools that they're allowed to use, and not one particular, because it just depends. The biggest thing that I've learned about models is some are better at certain things than others. It's almost like, here's a Phillips screwdriver, here's a flathead. and then here's a hammer, which sometimes you need. Um, and so with the models, you got things like, Claude Code and Codex and Gemini CLI and Cursor. We try to limit that somewhat. And we do have a platform internally, which proxies all those connections. Essentially, it's called FuelIX, which is on my shirt here. And that platform is what we send, Claude through, Claude Code through, Gemini CLI, Codex, all those things, Klein, etc. We send it through that platform, and in that platform, they can choose models, they can switch models, and it's a lot more flexibility for them. From a business standpoint, so that's two parts of the business. There's the development area, delivery area, and the non-delivery area. The non-delivery area, we try to limit it. We are Google Workspace customers, so we try to limit it to Gemini in the workspace, which has its protections around it. I think they all have this. O365 has this. Gemini has this. If you go with OpenAI Enterprise or ChatGPT Enterprise or Claude Enterprise, they have these deals or these setups that keep that data within your tenant. In those, we try to provide a path of least resistance. So you have Gemini, and you also have the FuelIX, which is our other platform. So those are our two that we stick to, and we stick to because the FuelIX platform allows us to switch models, and some folks just find better things out of Gemini that we can't get out of our own platform. So our platform is the de facto standard, and then Gemini is a second outside of delivery, and in delivery, I just went through all that stuff that we have to do, but we all still proxy all that through our platform.
Amazing. I mean, it sounds like you guys have really, wrapped your arms around, embraced a lot of those AI functions and features out there. I feel like there's a lot of organizations still struggling on how to do that. I was talking to a friend just the other day, and he was going on vacation, and he hit me up. He goes, well, first couple hours of vacation, I had to yell at somebody because they decided they wanted to use, plain Jane, right? Freeware OpenAI and dump a ton of data into it, and not even thinking, right, about security or data security. Do you find yourself having to slap any hands or deal with that, right? People going outside of your standard and using kind of some freeware AI.
So that's a great point. So this is that path of least resistance that we've tried to create with FuelIX and in our internal platforms, so that the need to go somewhere else is less. Is it zero? Probably not. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that it is. But it also brings up a good point, is a lot of enterprise tools are slow to add these features. And so the newest models, the hottest tools, start there and make their way into the enterprise, right? And so the inclination, if I want to use the newest model and see what the result is, I'm going to grab this thing, right? And just go for it. I'm not going to, even if I'm on a work computer and the work computer's blocking me, I'm just going to grab this thing and go for it and take a picture now and ask the question, and it's going to answer the question. There isn't anything stopping you from doing that. And so creating that path of least resistance, a culture, and then you as the person who owns the path of least resistance, and I'm not assuming it's you, I'm just, saying, you who owns that path needs to make sure that path continues to be an easy, greased up, least resistance path, meaning adding those new features quickly, adding new models quickly, adding new toys quickly, so that the inclination to go somewhere else is less. And that's how I think, again, I'm not the end all be all, but that's one way to mitigate your risk there. But it's still not going to drop to zero because, again, there are so many tools that you use, so many sites that you go to that already have it embedded in.
I think you said something pretty key there a couple times, actually. And it's something that we as security practitioners have known for years. I think some business leaders have forgotten it, but you're never going to get to zero, right, with regard to risk. And our job as security folks is to look to mitigate it as close to zero as possible. And I like your approach of we're going to build a culture that's going to enable and make this easier so your desire to circumvent me process tools is going to be less. I think that's great. How did you build that culture? Because I think a lot of our listeners are probably looking to do the same, right? They too are realizing this is the future. It's here to stay. We have to embrace it. But some of these organizations are aircraft carriers in size, right? They're going to turn slowly. So how do you recommend starting to kind of, change that culture?
I will admittedly, so when I started with Willow Tree, we were 140 people, right? Easy to like build that culture, easy to get to know everyone, their kids, and be, you're seen as one of them. But over time, we're now at 5,000. That has been incredibly difficult to do. So it has been challenging in, different cultures across the region and the globe, which has made that, much more difficult. I think the key principles do not change though. Make yourself approachable, get down, roll your sleeves up, show them that you love it just as much as they do. And, it over time, and it does with, I found with some cultures harder than others, but over time you get there to a point where someone can just message you on Slack or message you on Teams or your communication tool of choice when they have a question. I'm like, I'll answer it. Like, if I can answer it in that moment, I'll answer it. If not, they all understand that I'll get to them within 24 hours. It's just a little busy these days. And again, that path of least resistance is critical, in using folks to create that path of least resistance, to get their feedback, and constantly get their feedback and make adjustments. And the feedback builds trust. And, once you build trust, then that makes you approachable. Like it just all starts to like spin in a circle on each other and go downhill like an avalanche. And then the last thing I would say is, and you touched on this, when you make a path of least resistance, you are making it harder for them to go down another path. And humans, myself included, are not looking for the hardest path to go.
Right. Right, that's human nature, right? Take the easiest path to get the job done. Did I hear you say, because that's some amazing numbers, 140 to over 5,000 team members? Is that what I heard you say there?
Yes, yes. So part of that was, some acquisitions, organic growth, and then we were acquired and merged into a larger group, which is TELUS Digital Solutions. And that number is roughly around 5,000 right now.
Wow. So I've got to ask then. So I'm just going to call that hyper growth. Actually, timeline. Like, what are we talking about? 10 years for that, or what was that growth?
Yeah, it's about 10 years. 10 years now.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's still, multiples over a relatively short amount of time. A decade isn't that long in a career. That's for darn sure, especially for folks like you and I. Um, so bringing it back to data security, your answer initially was AI, kind of the biggest thing right now. I'm really curious, in your journey, 10 years, 140 people to over 5,000 people, your role being a CISO, what has been some of the growing pains that you've had to go through and challenges that you've had to conquer in that growth? Because I'm gonna assume there were a number of them.
Yeah, personally, there were a couple of ones. One, from a technical standpoint, when I first started with the company, the move to cloud had accelerated across the industry, right? And I came from a place that was zero cloud. We built a data center was our cloud, like a private cloud in a shared data center across the state, and that was our cloud, right? And we had I think it was 14 sites across the state of Florida, and this one data center, and that's how we ran our business. And so I had to make some adjustments there, which I think if you've been in this industry that long, you've all had to make that adjustment. networking doesn't work the same. Packet capture doesn't work the same. Making a simple mistake, now you expose yourself to the entire world instead of the entire VLAN. And so it has definitely been a up and coming thing. And I went from a group in the past that was a more conservative group as far as attorneys are concerned to developers. And whether I liked it or not, those developers pulled me in that direction. And that is the feedback thing. My inclination was to come in and kind of mirror a setup a little bit of what we had and create a private cloud so I could host GitHub repositories there and things of that nature. And, they poo-pooed it. They didn't want to be on a VPN. They didn't want to do this. And so there was talk back and forth and how can we get there? At the same time, a lot of SaaS companies were building trust in the sense of they were starting to always SSL, always, secure SSH, things of that nature. So the industry on the other side that you depend on was changing. And that change also helped that adoption and that growth. So that is one. The other big thing from a people standpoint was, and I'll be honest, I was not always like this because I had to deal with regulators. I had to deal with regulation. I had to deal with stuff. So I was in healthcare when HIPAA came out, and then I moved to banking. Then I was with attorneys, and so it was very regulated because those attorneys' clients were banks and healthcare, and so it was very regulated. So it wasn't like Adrian is asking you to do this. No, the federal government is asking you to do this, or the client is asking you to do this. And that is a different conversation. Now, I came to these developers where some of our clients were banking and healthcare, but as an industry itself, it was unregulated. And so I can't go in and say, Uncle Sam says do this, and so we must do this, because they're the first ones to be like, yeah, sure, because it wasn't really a thing, right? And so then it switched to from top down, you must do this, no questions asked, to now it's a conversation. Now I need to convince you. Now I need to show you why and give you the why and be more transparent in the sense of, here's what I'm thinking. How does it affect you? Because that took me time. It probably took me about 18 months to 2 years to figure out, right? 3 years. So I'm not going to say that I'm a freaking genius in that sense. I'm not. But it was more about survival, right? Because I wasn't going to survive there if I didn't adapt to this business. And that's when it clicked inside me of businesses are like people. Everybody's different. And you have to adjust your approach with those relationships with that business that you're in versus I treat one kid this way, I'm going to treat all kids this way, because if you have multiple kids, you know that that's not the case. And that's exactly how you treat businesses, right? You come into a business, you learn. You just shut up and you learn. You open your ears and close your mouth for the first, 6 months to a year and just figure it out. And then you can start like making suggestions and like working your way through there as you're building up relationships throughout the business in that period. So that was like the two biggest shifts for me was cloud and people wise and relationship wise was regulated, unregulated.
That shift piece, I've heard that from a few folks that I've talked to over the years. I experienced it myself a little bit. I mean, I spent a lot of time in financials, so to your point, highly regulated. Like, it's not necessarily a word saying thou must do this. It's this regulation, so on and so forth. We might have some listeners that might be struggling with that now, might struggle with in the future. Any words of wisdom for those leaders that maybe either way, right? Making a pivot from unregulated to regulated, or personally, I think it's harder, regulated to unregulated.
I think, again, it like I said, it all goes back to relationships. And the unregulated, where you have to convince that trust of Adrian. I know Adrian's going to try and look out for us. I know he's not going to make our lives harder. Is probably the biggest win that I've had in my career to achieve some of that. So that trust is huge. And so here's one of the things that I did from a, when I first came in is I found a team of the most senior vocal leaders. Yes, we were smaller, but I found that team. And I brought that team together at least once a month to just hear them out. Here's what I think I'm looking at doing. What do you guys think? How will this affect you? And that built trust with them. And the reason why I wanted senior and the reason why I wanted vocal is because when things change, those same vocal folks would say, no. We went down this path with him. Here's what we should be. Here's why he's doing this. Because I'm not going to be in that room. Another boss told me that the most important conversations about you are going to happen when you're not in the room. So make sure that you arm the people around you with that information, and you have a reputation or a brand of being trustworthy that helps that go a long way.
I think that's great advice and a great piece of wisdom there about, you're right. And I've seen and heard that too, where, yeah, the most important conversations, you won't be there. So hopefully you've made a good impression of somebody that they want to partner with. And B, hopefully you've imparted enough wisdom where if it's a security related conversation, they at least have some things, some nuggets of wisdom that you've dropped that they're like, oh, well, hey, Adrian said we should do this or whatever.
You'll love this. I had an incident one time, or not an incident, in a story where a customer was asking me to change the password policy from where it was to every 90 days. And customer's always right. So I went back and forth and trying to figure that out. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the password policy to every 90 days. That's pretty standard. We already did 12 characters at the time, and this is probably, I want to say, about 6 years ago. And the team didn't like it. That same leadership team didn't like it. And we left that meeting. And the one thing I told them, I was like, if you guys don't like it, you got to give me a reason. You got to show me or give me some sort of ammunition that I can give to the customer as to why. Well, lo and behold, to me, they went researching and found the NIST standard that said change less, longer password. They brought that to me. They showed me the NIST documentation, and I'm like, okay, this is what I need. And so what we decided in that group is, okay, now we're going to make our passwords 17 characters, but I'm going to keep the rotation at the same length at the same time it is, unless there is a breach, right? Unless we know of a breach from a client or from a SaaS provider. And they jumped in on it. They loved it. And so they were the biggest ones going out to the business, and the other engineers saying, here's what we're going to do and why. And I was left to deal with the customer, which I was able to convince the customer's security personnel, and their risk and compliance team, that this was the way to go. And here's why. And, working together, we got there. We got the result that we wanted, and there was some compromise along the way. But they're the ones who brought that NIST standard to me. I didn't go find it myself.
And they felt that was a win, right? They didn't want to do what you did. They gave you the pushback. So we want to do this. Like, you had good, information in your hands. You're like, all right, whatever. And when you were saying that, I was thinking about this in my head. I've seen some memes for this, right? So you went from, I think you said 12 to 17. What'd they do? Add, 5 numbers at the end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now they have their new password.
I hope to God not, but I'm not going to say that didn't happen, but I hope that didn't happen. But even so, if you understand how hashing works, even if they did that, it still makes it incredibly longer and harder to crack, right? So
right.
Just long enough that when our password policy did take into effect, they changed their password and add another number at the end of that.
Right. Now we got 6 at the end and 7. I mean, we know
Yes.
users do it. Shoot, I've done it for some of my personal passwords before, right? The ones that don't really make a difference. Like, all right, we'll change it, we'll update whatever and call it a day.
Well, at the same time, we implemented something we implemented a password manager roughly around the same time. And then we set in the policy of the password manager that it had to be no shorter than 20 characters, right? So they could go up to 46 characters. And then the password manager, if it generated something, it'd be 20 characters and it'd be random. And so, I tried to give them tools to kind of figure that out. And really the only thing to remember and change was the password manager itself.
That's awesome. I've worked in a few organizations where leaders have wanted to up the password complexity, but they don't give the tool back to the users to manage those passwords. And the password manager was always my go-to. Like I'm thinking years ago, you had like KeyPass, right? And then now there's a bunch of other ones out there on the market. And then they get mad when people would put it in text documents, right? Put their passwords. Like, what do you expect, right?
Or under their keyboard.
Right under the keyboard. Yeah, the good old sticky notes. Although, man, I almost want to do when if I was in enterprise still, I would almost want to do like a home check, right? To pivot your webcam around. Let's see how many whiteboards have passwords written on them at home. I think that would be a pretty funny audit to do of your remote employees. Oh man. Well, Adrian, you've had a pretty amazing career journey, in my opinion. Like I said on the intro, you and I worked together over a decade ago. You were a frontline manager. Now you're a CISO. You already told us, going from 140 people to over 5,000. What was your journey? How did you get to individual contributor many years ago, over 2 decades ago, to being a CISO today?
By mistake. That's probably the biggest thing I can say. I have a degree in electronic engineering, so it was nothing to do with IT or security. But I've always been, again, the tech enthusiast in me led me down this path. I got into IT with a friend's father who ran a managed service company. So in that managed services company, I saw a lot of different things very early in my career, from Linux to Cisco to Windows to domain controllers to Novell networks. I saw a lot just in the first 2 years of my career that allowed me to kind of go down this path. Later, as I moved up, I got it in an IT director position with a hospital when HIPAA came out. And we were sitting around the table because HIPAA required a security officer. And they were trying to decide who was going to be these positions to just serve compliance. Lo and behold, that boss just pointed at me for the security officer. And that was it. My career changed. Like, it was a simple finger pointing that changed the trajectory of my career from just IT ops into security. And that was early mid 2000s.
So you were voluntold at that point, right? Like you were pointed at and said, "Congratulations, you're now the security officer." Wow.
Yes. And didn't come with a raise, didn't come with a title. We just came with this extra responsibility, right? Which is typical in our world sometimes. So that I had to go to HIPAA training. I had to learn what security is, data security, and over the next 18 months before HIPAA was implemented, I had to kind of like dive into the world of InfoSec and why. I found out I loved it. I have the mindset for it. I played football. I was a defender. I was always a better defender than I was an offense playing basketball as well. And that mindset of taking pride in defense that I had in sports just kind of moved over to my career, and it was just a natural fit for me. And so on and so forth. And I just kept moving up there, and it's been mostly a who situation as far as switching jobs, right? It's always like who you know and not what you know. So, worked for several individuals, and then I came back full circle because at that managed services company, I worked with an individual there who started a company called Willow Tree, who then hired me to the InfoSec leader at WillowTree, who was VP at the time. And then it just kind of like just kept going from there. So I've been extremely fortunate with the people that I've met and helped me along the way. I've also been extremely fortunate in able to create the relationships that I've been able to create, because those relationships come full circle. Sometimes I'm still talking with the individual who hired me and that I worked with years ago. And I still talk to that first boss who pointed his finger at me and said, "You're going to do this." He has since retired. And so we have other things that we joke about now, but I still talk to him, and just about every boss that I had, and people who leave me, I still talk to. Like it's you're here day to day. You spend more time with these people than you do sometimes with your own family. And so it behooves you to have relationships with these folks as well. And it just makes your life a little bit more pleasant and a little bit more fulfilling. I feel like I went way philosophical on you.
No, that's amazing. And I love to have these conversations with folks like yourself because many times it's that one point in your career. And obviously we've got multiple points in our career, but for you, it sounds like there's that one point that really shaped where you are today. And you could have said, no thanks, right? Pass. When he pointed to you, and you could have taken his finger and pointed to someone else and said, no, like they're gonna do that. But you embraced it, right? You said you did the training, you learned about it, you learned that you love it, and here you are. And it's really amazing when you kind of think back to that.
I like a challenge, sometimes at my own, my own pain, but I like a challenge.
So I'm gonna ask you an important question then. So you had that pivotal point where you were pointed to. Knowing what you know today, if you could go back in time shortly after that meeting that you were appointed to be the security officer at that company, are there any words of advice that you would give your younger self based on your today's knowledge?
You got this. Like there was times that I was doubting it, and I was very young in my career, so there was the need to prove myself. So I'm not going to say that wasn't part of the, sure, I got it, I can do this. And there's other factors probably involved there from a mental standpoint, but I think I would just give myself encouragement. And if I could go back even farther, I would have got into InfoSec even earlier.
I like it. Hype yourself up. So you got this. Like keep going, keep trudging. Awesome. Awesome. Last question I have for you. It's not about your career, but thought provoking. Um, we got about a quarter left, right? 3 months left or so here in 2025. Got any predictions for data security or anything for 2026 here?
Yeah, I will say that congratulations, and I'm sorry. So data security is going to get harder, but you're going to get better tools to deal with it, right? And it's one of those, congratulations, you're getting better tools, but I'm sorry, because you're going to be dealing with a harder problem, and it's only going to get harder. And I don't want to I know that doesn't sound encouraging, but I'm trying to be real. Like, brace yourself. There is a lot of change that's going to happen in the next 18 months before the dust settles on how AI is going to affect society. And in that time, you just need to have a change mindset, because it's going to be constant change until that works its way out.
I think that's a good prediction, and I think good words of wisdom to go with it. Like, yeah, it's going to get harder, but I think for you and I, at least me, I'm a technologist. I'm excited. I'm excited to see the applications and also see the challenges. I think folks like you and I are going to embrace that, and it makes our day to day exciting, difficult but exciting.
Yeah, I mean, just think about just I want you to grasp on this statement that we coming up in our career was, hey, I wish I had a tool that would do something, right? Because I'm doing this. And so we go scour the internet for freeware or shareware or something and bring some other risk into the business, or not quite get what we want, but got something. Now I'm just like, I'm just going to go vibe code that thing and then see if I can get it to work. Right. Now I got a thing that all of a sudden I can hand off to a developer and say, go make it enterprise ready. Right. So I just gave them a technical requirements document. Right. So I've done that on several occasions now. And there's stuff that runs in the enterprise to help out security and help out development. That came from, I wish we had this. I'm going to spend a weekend just talking to AI and building something and then handing it off to somebody else to make it good. We never had that. Like, that's amazing.
No, I think back in the day, the only semi-equatable thing is if you had, an Uber smart developer, you could have that same conversation. They're quickly prototyping right as you're talking. Like, that's as close as we got years ago when you and I started.
It's even faster. And then the other scenario is you have you're in a situation as a leader and as a technologist where, so for you mentioned the budget thing and you mentioned overlapping tools. Now you can take an inventory using it in one of your models that stay within your workspace. You can take an inventory of all your stuff and say, show me where there's overlaps, create a Venn diagram of overlaps of tools, right? And you don't have to like, what does this do? What does this do? You can have like the AI kind of like just work through that data set and say, here are the overlapping tools. Here are the features that you say you need. Here are the features that you didn't mention that you need. Here's what you can get rid of. Like, that's a starting point. It's not going to be perfect, but you just did like 40 hours worth of work in 5 minutes.
But please do that in an enterprise AI tool, not open source. Don't put your entire security stack out in open source, folks. Don't do that.
No. And I don't mean, it's probably a larger set, but I definitely, like I said before, in your enterprise safe AI or whatever you have going on and not in a free version of ChatGPT.
Yeah. Man, I'm thinking back about 7 or 8 years ago now. I wish I would have had something because I can't tell you how many hours of my day and my weeks I put into some of those rationalization exercises with a spreadsheet. What's our licensing? Do we have all these modules? Oh my goodness. Crazy. Adrian, if folks want to connect and, keep in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
You could find me on LinkedIn. I don't do much socialing around the world, only because I'm a tech enthusiast. I'm not necessarily a social enthusiast. So I leave my wife as my publicist. So we just call it that way. And I spend a lot of time with them. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for joining this episode.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. And big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed the episode today and learned something. Please give us a follow on LinkedIn and tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centro.io. Catch you next time.